Hi, I'm Greg Ullin with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today, I'm really excited I get to talk with Brad Gelber. He's the Director of Marketing at West Herr Automotive Group. We're probably going to go all over the place, so get your pen out, maybe take a few notes. Brad, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Brad, West Herr, upstate New York group, lots of locations, I think 40 stores. Give a little background, a little context for maybe the group, the size of the group, the scope, and kind of what your responsibilities are there. I think you have quite a few, so it might take a while, but we can dive in wherever you want to go.
Yeah. So largest auto group in New York State, sort of the easiest way, I guess, to say it. Usually depending top 20 in the country. So when I started here 8 years ago, I knew we were a big group in terms of for the area, but I had no idea sort of the size and scale coming from a predominantly Buffalo sort of area dealer. I would always think of like, oh, well, I'm sure there's bigger dealers downstate or stuff like that closer to New York City. But no, we're big, but we're pretty big in nationally as well. So like you said, 40 locations across up Western New York there. So Buffalo, Rochester, and then we have a single point in Syracuse as well. And we also have collision and glass locations. We have a vehicle accessories location. A lot going on with our group here. But in terms of responsibilities, overseeing the marketing team here really, and trying to kind of own the branding and storytelling aspect of West Herr. We're up to about a 10-person internal marketing team here now at West Herr. So we've grown slow and steady over the years. For a long time, it was just myself and two other folks internally here for almost half my time at West Herr, which again, when I started at West Herr, I figured there was a 40-person marketing team here, and lo and behold, there was two people here when I started. So we've grown slowly, like I said, methodically, but we do work with outside vendors and some folks who are technically contractors who are a big part of our team as well. But yeah, my job, I kind of came up on the social media side, content creation of things. So that's like where my background started. And ever since then, I've just continued to sort of grow within marketing as a whole. And now I get, like I said, I have the fortune to work with a lot of really talented people here at West Herr, and just continue to try to tell those stories. And it's easy to do when you work at our group because there's just so much interesting stuff to talk about. So I'm fortunate. But yeah, I think that's probably how I would describe my role is trying to keep the marketing ship afloat here. So.
No, I like it. So there's a lot of places that I want to dive into to get your perspective on, but I want to start something. I was just doing a little research before we started talking. You're from, I think, originally from kind of the Buffalo area, right? Just outside of Buffalo. And then did you go to college in Boston? Like at Emerson College? Did I see that right?
Yep. So okay. I'm from here, and then I went to school out in Boston. I worked there for a little bit, and then I came back home.
So how did you end up there? Like, Boston's a great city, but it's not kind of right in your backyard. Not a big, large, prominent school. So I guess how did you end up there?
Yeah. So I kind of knew that I wanted to leave home. So a lot of people in Buffalo, they're homebodies for the most part. Like a lot of my friends stayed, never left, and kind of just decided this is where they were going to be, which is great if that's what you want to do. But for myself, I sort of wanted to see what else was out there. And Buffalo, if you know anything about the area, it's usually very long lineage tied back to the area. So you have like your parents and your grandparents and their parents all were from this area. So both of my parents are transplants, though. My mom's from Long Island. My dad's actually from Canada, Hamilton area, up that way. So neither parent was from this area. Don't have a ton of family locally here. So I kind of wanted to just explore what else was out there. And oddly, we traveled growing up, and Boston was not a city I had been to, though. I was pretty set on going to Chicago, actually. I had gotten into a few schools in Chicago, and I actually had set my sights on Loyola out in Chicago. I already had a roommate and everything. And Emerson, actually, I ended up getting in off the wait list. And it was a last second decision. And I went up and visited for like a night over the weekend. I was just sold on it. So Emerson was rated very highly for marketing and communications, and it's actually a really well-known broadcast journalism school too. So Jay Leno, a lot of entertainers and broadcast people have gone to Emerson, oddly enough. So while it might not be a super notable name in terms of like a big school, there was quite about a few well-known alumni there. So I just was sold. I loved the school. I loved the city when I visited it, and then I just decided what the heck. So I made the decision to go there, and I'm super glad I did because it was an awesome experience.
Very cool. No, that is awesome. It kind of struck me as it just seemed like something that was a little bit out of place. So I mean, that's a great story. Great story. And you mentioned obviously broadcast journalism, and you did that for a little while, didn't you? Weren't you a sports writer or a sports broadcaster?
Yeah, so I have sort of a weird background. I'd always been called like to sports. Was, especially, I mean, again, if you're from Buffalo, you're sort of gonna enjoy sports probably in one way or another. But I'd always had this pull of like marketing on one side, and then this journalism aspect on the other. And I always was sort of teetering between the two of like how do I figure out what I want to do. And it's tough when you're young. I tell this to people all the time, and our interns and things of like, well, how do I make the right decision? And it's like there really isn't a right decision. It's just about trying stuff and figuring it out. So I had done some different journalism things tied to sports. I was on a couple TV shows locally here, some player hosted football shows, and I did some writing, like you mentioned, for some bigger publications. And then I worked actually locally at a couple TV stations here in news as well. And I, as much as I enjoyed it as like a part of my job, I realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to do that as my only job. So I really missed marketing and sort of that aspect of it, the creativity and all this sort of thing, because in journalism, it's a very like fast paced, and it's just, you got to get it out by the 11 o'clock news. And there's not always time to actually be creative. It's more of like churn and burn, especially on a local level, probably different when you're, at these big national stations. But so I really missed that component of it. And that's sort of how I ended up back in marketing full time. But I'm super fortunate, as I'm sure we'll get into, that I found a way to sort of pair those together. So even though I'm on the marketing side, I still get to kind of do this podcasting and journalism writing thing here at West Herr. So it's been really cool for me in my career growth to kind of get to keep those two together at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and the other piece of it that I'm interested in and want to dig into is, the sports side of it. So West Herr Automotive Group has, obviously a deal with Josh Allen, Steve Tasker, and then a couple of other Bills players that you guys really lean into. So talk a little bit about that, what that relationship is like. And then I want to probably go a little bit deeper, but just start there with kind of how you guys work with them and what that relationship's like.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you the story, I guess, maybe of how it started, because that's always
that'd be great.
Cool story here. So historically, West Herr, so for those who maybe don't know, we're actually not the official automotive sponsor of the Bills. That's another local automotive group here. So we actually decided that was a decision of years ago that we weren't going to go that route. And we had worked historically with Steve Tasker, obviously ex-Bills player, retired for a number of years, sort of just like a really well-known guy, really well-respected guy, and had been doing this with us for a while. So it was kind of like the safe option, because one of the things that you can never sort of know, especially in Buffalo, was the player going to pan out, because we had such a bad football team for so long that working with an active player, they could be gone in 6 months or a year, and then you've invested in them and they're not there anymore. Likewise, the risk behind possibly them getting into trouble, and now they're associated with your brand. So there's a lot of risks maybe people don't see when it comes to making the decision to have like a spokesperson or an influencer work with you that's, actively in the spotlight. So for a long time, it was just Steve Tasker. And sort of when I started a couple years in, our former marketing director at the time and myself were sort of beating up, like, how do we get more involved with the Bills without being the official sponsor of the team? And we figured out a way would be to work with the players directly rather than through a team affiliation. So sort of like this rise in influencer marketing, it was like, well, who are the celebrities in Buffalo that anyone cares about? And it's pretty much local news people or the professional athletes. Those are sort of the two groups we had to work with, really. So we figured out if we work with the players directly, we don't have to pay the team for the rights to the players, and we can just pay them, and then it works out great. So at the time, this was about a year after Josh Allen was drafted, still super unknown. Was he going to pan out? Like, obviously there were super high hopes for him, but nowhere near the stratosphere of where he is now. So our, former marketing director and myself were coming up with like a thought of putting together this concept that we ended up naming Team West Herr. And we were like, okay, well, maybe we can get Josh to do like a small social media sort of deal, and then we'll go from there, see if it even works out, pay him for a couple Instagram posts, and we'll just see how it goes. And we actually ended up meeting with our CEO and president, Scott Beeler, and Scott was like listening to us, and he's like, okay, that's good, but if we're gonna pay Josh, I want him on TV. We were like, okay, well, that's not really what we had in mind here. But he's like, no, we're going to put him on TV. So we're like, okay, I guess we're going to put him on TV. So we ended up getting in, reaching out to his people. And oddly enough, the story boiled down to Josh was super interested in getting a Ford Raptor at the time, was the vehicle he really wanted. And the other auto group locally didn't have a Ford dealership, which that's our background. We started as a Ford only store and grew from there. So he ended up choosing West Herr because we had the vehicle he wanted. Honestly, really, that was really what, simple. I'm sure there was more to it than that, but that was really like, if you boiled it down, that's how it worked out. And things just sort of blossomed for there. It was one of those things where you kind of catch on to a rising star, basically. And we had no idea at the time Josh would turn into who he is now and the MVP of the league and all this stuff. But man, was it just such amazing timing that it worked out for us. And obviously once we had Josh in the fold and we had Steve there, we decided to try to figure out this concept of adding other players around him to sort of add supporting, characters, if you will, to the story. Because it's, two guys is fine, but we wanted to have some other faces and things and stories to tell. So at one point, I think the team was up to like 8 different Bills players, and that got too big. It was too much to manage, and trying to work with all different agents and players and figure out how to story tell and this and that. And we also have to sell cars, and it's just too much. So eventually we got down to sort of our core group now, which is, as you mentioned, Steve, Josh, then Deion Dawkins, who is, just such an awesome guy in himself, probably one of the most notable offensive linemen in the league. Just super entertaining if you've ever seen him speak or anything or any of the content with him. And then Dawson Knox, tight end here, who's another just super good guy. So we just locked in this kind of core group that complement each other so well. And they've grown, with the city, with the team. They've grown in their comfort on camera and what we can do with them in content and things and TV stuff and all this stuff. So it's been now, 5 or 6 years of doing this. And we actually just had our shoot for this year on last Friday. So what that entails is it was a 14-hour day. So we started at 7 a.m. We wrapped at 9 p.m. And what we do that day is we shoot the content for the whole year in one day. So oftentimes we get asked, like, in mid-season, you'll see, some angry person on Instagram commenting, being like, why is Josh Allen shooting a commercial? He should be training for the game or whatever. And it's like, no. Like, he's not filming the commercial in November. Like, we shoot everything in July in the off season. So we usually film 4 or 5 TV spots. We shoot all of our social content with the guys. We do all of our photography. Pretty much everything that involves one of the players is done on that day once a year. So that's like our Super Bowl, honestly. Like, someone said that to me last week, and I was like, laughed. I'm like, that's actually pretty true. That is like our Super Bowl. So we film at a few different locations throughout the day, and it's crazy, but when you wrap with it, you kind of sit back and realize how much you accomplished in one day. And then all the fun of the editing and the producing of the content starts now. So that's where we get into that. But yeah, that gave you a lot of information there, but that's sort of the crux of how it started, how it kind of transitioned, and then, what it entails when we do the production of it.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there, and I do want to go a little deeper. So the first thing that popped into my head is you're talking about the four players that, with Steve's a former player, but the four personalities that you have. I would assume that Josh Allen is the core, right? The anchor. He's the superstar. He's the starting quarterback for the bit. I mean, great news for you guys too. He just signed an extension through 2030, so you got him there for at least another 5 years. Yep. But I don't know. You have your star. And then did you kind of like cast? Did you want certain personalities, or is it just, it's sort of how it worked out? Did you have a vision for what the cast and crew kind of looks like?
Yeah, we definitely wanted to have support, like I said, around him. And so we found guys that were comfortable, that knew him. So we actually had Harrison Phillips, who now plays for the Minnesota Vikings, is a defensive tackle, super great guy, one of Josh's best friends. He was on Team West Herr while he was in Buffalo. And then he, unfortunately for us, ended up leaving for Minnesota. So that's another thing, by the way, dealing with like contracts, like they're people and they leave and go to other cities. So when you have 8 people, you got to worry about them getting traded or signing with another team. So Harrison was one of the only ones that, knock on wood, that we've lost. A couple other guys that were maybe lesser known players sort of moved on as well. But yeah, it was totally just like, what are the right personalities? Who is a good cultural fit for West Herr? Because culture is so important. And when we hire for the group, so we were like, we need to carry those values through. Community, you and I chatted briefly before the podcast here about community. All of these guys are heavily involved in the local Western New York community. They all have nonprofits that are either their own or that they work closely with. So all these values were super important. And what also mattered to us wasn't, I've talked to a lot of NFL agents over the years, as you'd expect. Every year around, draft time, I get emails, texts, calls. Hey, we want so-and-so to work with West Herr. And so like I become this fielding person of like NFL agents. And I can't tell you how many calls I've had trying to sort of explain what we do here and how it's more than just the dollars and cents. If you sign with West Herr, we want to support that person. We want to help them grow. We want to tell their stories. We want to support their nonprofit. There's a lot that goes into it. And I can't blame the agent, because at the end of the day, their job is to try to get as much money as they can for their player. Like, I get that. Right. But sometimes I try to explain to them, like, you might get a better offer somewhere else, but like, you're not going to get the same experience and the tenure and the things that we're offering. And most of them just say, yeah, okay, thanks. Have a good day. Hang up, whatever. So, but then there's some who understand it. And I think these guys that are with us now saw that early on. And I mean, for Dion to be part of the team, that's Josh's left tackle. The guy he protects on the field. They have like the tightest bond you could ever have. So it was, and just like I said, to add, he's like an amazing personality, so good on camera, entertaining. So he was a natural fit. Dawson was another guy. Him and Josh are super good friends. And it was just, he's super likable, like guy next door, willing, big smile on his face, like golden retriever energy. So it was just like really the personalities and who they are as people, I think. And then they've all grown as, quote, on-air personalities. So that part came after for some of them, but they're all tremendous now. And we just ended up with such a good group of people.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So going back to 2019, so now you have, Josh Allen, you have the other guys on board. So you're getting calls, right? You're fielding calls. It's reactive. Agents want to come to you. Oh, this group, it's a big group. They employ, or, they partner with professional athletes. So they're coming to you. But, there's 32 cities in the U.S. with an NFL team. Yep. And, like I'm in Dayton, Ohio, so we're an hour north of Cincinnati. We have the Bengals in Cincinnati, but we have large groups in Dayton that obviously I'd say a vast majority of people are Bengals fans right where I'm at. So for somebody in one of those cities, yep. How do you even get started, right? Like, I mean, you had Steve Tasker, so was that an in? Yeah. Like you mentioned, you hosted a radio show with a couple of football guys from the Bill. Like, was that an in? How do you connect those dots, or do you just reach out to the agent and say, hey, we're interested in doing something? Like, how do you get in?
Yeah. Honestly, it was one of those things where it sort of unfolded. Like I said, it was originally meant to be more of a social media play, and we invest heavily in content. That was sort of why I was hired here. So if you're an auto group that's like just kind of doing the traditional advertising play of TV or radio, and you're not really invested in your content, it would be hard to leverage the personalities the way I think we do. So just further context, I probably should have mentioned. So before I worked at West Herr, I actually worked at a local startup for social media, because Buffalo's not as advanced on the times as like a New York City or Chicago would be. So when I graduated, I had the opportunity to either, like I said, I worked in Boston for a little bit at a social media agency out there. And when I came home, it was either kind of go back to a traditional advertising agency and work on like in the account service side of things, or take a chance and join a startup. So I worked at a startup locally for a couple of years here, where we worked out of the owner's house. It was myself, him, and then we had one graphic designer. But no one was doing social media for businesses locally. So we were working with some of the biggest businesses in Buffalo, but just because they didn't really have an option to work anywhere else. So one of the other local auto groups at the time worked with us, and they were one of my biggest clients. So they were actually the official automotive sponsor. So I worked with them on a lot of Bill's content back when I was at that group. And they had sort of the traditional spokesperson that was affiliated that the team provided. So we had like Stevie Johnson, who was a prominent wide receiver back in the day, and then Sammy Watkins, who was another prominent receiver with the Bills. So I had kind of like cut my teeth on doing some of this Bills partnership stuff with an auto group, sort of built out content for them for a while. And then when I came here, it was like, okay, well, we can probably do something similar, but do it in our own way and not do it through the team affiliation, like I mentioned. So I had experience, like I said, working in sports, and then even on the automotive side of sort of that partnership aspect. So when we kind of got together and built out this Team West Herr concept, it was like, I think one of the earliest things I learned early on is we're never going to compete with the Bills, because they have unparalleled access. They have a bajillion people working on this content all the time, and they can just go up to any player at any time and interview them, do whatever they want to do.
Right.
And we also can't use on-field footage because we're not the official partner. So there was a lot of like guardrails on it. So instead of trying to compete with the Bills or compete with ESPN or any of these media entities, it was like, well, what can we do that's different than these entities? And it was like, what if we told the stories of these players as people? Because I think sometimes we forget, like we see Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or whoever it is, and we think like they're just these NFL superstars. That's all they ever do. They just care about football. It's like, no, they're people at the end of the day too. So it was like, we can probably give people an inside look at these folks as human beings. Like, why don't we try it out? So one of the first things we ever did, I remember, and people still bring this up to me, we rigged up a Ford, I think it was a Bronco back then or something. And we basically put cameras inside the car. We told Josh to go on a drive. So remember, this is back in Josh's second year before people really knew who he was. Now we could never do this because who knows what would happen. But it was Josh and Harrison, and we did this ride along series where they were rigged up in the car, and we told them to just go drive for like half an hour and just talk about whatever they want to talk about. We gave them a couple ideas, but overall they just went and talked, and we cut this thing up and made it into like a 4-part series or 5-part series. And to this day, it was one of the coolest content series because it just gave people a chance, like to basically you were in the back seat with Josh Allen and Harrison Phillips for half an hour. And it's such a simple concept, but it also tied into cars, obviously, as an automotive group. But again, that insider access that you couldn't get, like you and I couldn't just walk in and go sit in their car. So we started doing more and more of that, and then also leveraging them in more traditional ways like billboards and TV and stuff. But I'd say the content creation around that stuff was sort of what gave us this competitive advantage. And then, some of it was reaching out to agents and just saying, hey, we're doing this thing, we want to try it out. And they're like, cool, can you help us with this car or this deal, whatever. And so some of that was just building out the proof of concept. And then once we did, more and more, like you said, agents called or player. You'd be surprised the amount of players that go up to Josh and say like, hey, can I be part of this West Herr thing? Like it's grown into that now, which is super cool. But early on, it was like a proof of concept. But I think just coming up and being creative with like what we could do that other people weren't doing was sort of how it like let us hit the ground running.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about sort of the high level strategy and the belief that you have as to why this stuff works, right?
Yeah.
So we can talk about influencer marketing, but more specifically for you, you're partnering with professional football players. You're creating fun content, interesting content, highlighting them as a person. How does that? So if I'm a dealer, if I'm a marketing director, if I'm whatever, somebody responsible for stroking a check, right? Because we don't have to talk about how much it is, but I'm confident it's much more than $0 that you're paying these guys, right? Yeah. So, so I'm the one stroking the check. How do I justify it, right? Like, what is my guiding principle that says, you know what, this is going to help us sell more cars. This is going to get more people in the door. This is going to get our foot in somebody's, kind of feed to bring them into us. What's the guiding principle?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think if you're looking for hard ROI on it, it's probably not going to be like the thing for you. I think for us, it's just a belief that this works. Like we were always big on branding in general before this. We'll be big on branding probably after Josh Allen's won 6 Super Bowls and is retired at that point.
Listen to you. Yeah. Listen to you.
So I had to slide that in there somewhere. So, but honestly, it's like it's same thing, simplistically with branding. Like you either believe branding works or it doesn't. And I think with our brand locally, most people, if you were to ask them, they know West Herr one way or another. They've heard of West Herr. They know West Herr if you're from this area. So we've invested in branding for a long time. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year. So we've been around for 75 years. But I think you sort of believe it or you don't. And then I think, social listening, the aspect of like reading what people are saying about you, reviews, all those sort of things. It's funny the number of times we've read over the years, whether it's true or not. Like I went to West Herr because you work with Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen's on the level of like a god locally here. Like he's like in another stratosphere. So to compare him to even, no offense to Dion or Dawson or Steve Tasker or any of these other guys, but he's just such on a different level that I would believe there are passionate Bills fans who shop at West Herr because Josh is affiliated with us. Is it the same with every other NFL or professional athlete? Probably not. But I think a lot of people look at it like if you're willing to invest in the stuff we care about, we're willing to then work with you as a business partner. So like, again, in Buffalo, the Bills are probably the most important thing to a lot of people here. It's just a fact. So we've actually struggled, honestly, transparently, with trying to figure out, should we do something similar? Should we with the Sabres, because they also are a big deal locally, but they're sort of now in their own stretch of missing the playoffs for almost as long as the Bills missed the playoffs for now. They have not been relevant locally from the standpoint of success in a long time. So it's harder. And hockey's a more niche sport than football is. So football is obviously by far and away, outside of probably soccer, like the most popular sport in the world. So it's one of those things where it just made sense for us on the football side, but we struggled on how do we bridge it over, because there's this core group of people locally that are super passionate hockey fans. And I always get asked, like, why don't you work with the Sabres players? Why don't you have a Sabres player on the podcast? And it's like, we could, but we only have so much time in the day to dedicate to this stuff. And we see the value more in football. So that's a struggle in its own. But just speaking to that, like the ROI, I think is you're investing back in the community. People look at the Bills as part of our community. And they love when we support the players and in turn their charities, like I talked about, the nonprofit sort of side of that. So I think at the end of the day, if you believe in branding, it's an extension of your branding. And if you can tie your brand to people that have attention, like the Bills players, then that's where it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So you view it, just to kind of put a point on it, when you think of influencer marketing and specifically the way that you guys leverage it with professional football players, it's brand marketing. It is not, you're not saying, come down for, a $3.99 a month lease. Josh Allen said it's great. It's more so we're present. We're in the community. You have to have some content for people to engage with, and what you're leaning into is content that you believe that they like, they'll want to listen to, they'll want to see, they'll want to read, which ties in with Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills. Is that fair? Where it's like, this is by every stretch brand marketing at its core, and this is the type of message that we're just leaning into.
Yeah, totally. And it's not that we don't use them in more quote salesy ways. Like we film something that we call opens and closes. So those are on like a green screen, and we'll have the guys sort of read more standard sales messaging that we use throughout the year that we then can plug in the middle, whatever the sales message is. So if it's like Josh Allen saying something, quirky in the beginning, and Steve Tasker closes it in the middle, insert your, Ford F-150 lease deal or whatever for the month. So it's not that we don't use them in sales ways, but that's not the core competency behind it. It's definitely the brand awareness. And this year we filmed, for the first time, we filmed a couple fixed ops pieces that were tied to service, collision, glass, and then also technician recruiting. Obviously, everyone in this industry knows how hard it is to recruit technicians, probably the number one challenge that a lot of auto groups face. So we were like, we've spent years and years sort of using these guys to promote us from a variable standpoint. But we should try to leverage them on a fixed ops side as well. So that's sort of what we started dabbling more in this year with them. But yeah, it's traditional, branding at the end of the day. That's sort of how we utilize the guys the most.
Yeah. Does anybody, including you, struggle with the amount that you spend on it? So you mentioned, you kind of get one day with these guys, you blow it out, you get 14 hours that you're with them. You get, call it, I don't know, probably 10 hours of footage to splice up and use throughout the year. So you get a day, right?
Yeah.
And whatever the check is you're stroking, is there ever like any pushback from, anybody at the store? Do you ever go, man, is this really worth it? Like, how do you get over that hump? I got to feel there's at some point you see a number and it's like, ooh, okay, well, we got to make the most of this content.
Yeah. No, I think honestly, we have a lot of buy-in from the leadership team here. They really believe, and they've gotten to know these guys on a personal level. So they believe in the investment, I would say, at the end of the day, which makes it a lot easier. If you were fighting with, your CEO or your VPs all the time and trying to prove the worth, that would definitely be more difficult. But yeah, I look at it both ways. Honestly, I look at it sometimes as it's one day, or some years we've done it split over 2 days. But as Josh's celebrities have risen, we sometimes have to make it work. So, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's one day, super long day. But if you sit down, I was sitting down with our team yesterday and we were sort of just recapping the shoot, talking through it. And I started like talking about how we all appreciate the day of all that goes into it. But then I was trying to give some kudos to like our videographers and editors, our graphic design team, and then our photographers whose work's really just starting now. Right. Because they now have to take this stuff that you just said over 10 hours, 14 hours, whatever it is. And now we got to take all that and make it worthwhile to your point you just made. So it's like, it is one day, but we have so much that we do in one day that it does typically really, like truly, not just saying this, it lasts us for pretty much a year with all the stuff we film and we shoot. Now, in the beginning, before we kind of knew what we were doing and we were testing it out, we learned a lot because it was like you said, we get very limited time. We got to make it work. And I think we've just gotten so, not to boast, but we've gotten good at sort of utilizing the time that we churn out so much that then we know how to sort of throttle it throughout the year. So we're not just putting it all out before the season even starts, but also making sure that we are still timely and relevant with the stuff because fever time period comes up where, in August or July, we hit training camp, then August is preseason, September, the regular season starts. So we sort of have to be a couple months ahead, making sure we have everything produced and good to go, and then figure out, okay, when are we going to drop this TV commercial? When's this social piece going to come out? When's this, by the way, we do a podcast as well, which is now, this is our third season doing it, that I co-host with another one of the Bills players who's not one of those core members. And we sort of use the podcast as an extension as well. So we interview a bunch of the players as well on that. We interview all sorts of people on the podcast. But this season, it's myself and Ray Davis, who's a running back for the Bills. So the podcast is its own complete production that we also film at the shoot. But then we have to throttle those interviews with Josh Allen and Steve and all the guys throughout the season. So this year, for instance, we filmed a Halloween episode with Josh that won't be released till Halloween. Last year we did a Thanksgiving one, the year before a Christmas one. So we sort of plan all that and then know we'll utilize it later on. So yeah, it's super interesting just how we go about actually using the content. But there's times where it's like, okay, it's all in one day, but then it's also like, oh my God, we got all this to do after one day as well. So.
No, you're right. Okay, well, we talked a long time on that piece of it, which I love. I'm so glad that you went into such detail. I want to shift gears real quick though, and talk a little bit about West Herr Cares. So this is another. I mean, there's really two big pieces to it that I'll let you go into, but from my perspective, right, you have the community involvement, the philanthropic aspect to it. That's obviously really important to you guys as an organization. And then you also have really the branding aspect of it too, where you can kind of leverage it to draw attention to how much of an impact giving can have. So I don't know. Tell me a little bit about, from your perspective, West Herr Cares, how you view it and what you guys do.
Yeah. So essentially West Herr Cares, as you already said, is sort of our nonprofit community giving aspect arm of the company, whatever you want to call it. And if anyone knows Scott Beeler, knows of Scott Beeler, definitely one of the most philanthropic people you'll ever meet. It's just sort of in his DNA, who he is. And how he sort of built West Herr to be. Like it trickles down truly between our leadership team to, the corporate team, to the store, the leadership team at the store level, all the way down to, the part-time lot person at the store. Like everyone truly buys in, and that goes back to the culture that I sort of spoke on earlier. But Scott, sort of being at the top, has always been a philanthropic person. But his fear was always that like we would tell those stories in a way maybe that people would think he was only doing it for the spotlight, which is never, ever what he wanted. So like I said, I started here about 8 years ago, and early on we would sort of tell these stories, but we would do it in a way that was very, generic. It was always like West Herr gives X amount to whatever. It was never talking about Scott Beeler. Scott actually has his own separate foundation from West Herr called the Scott Beeler Family Foundation, which is a whole other organization that gives a ton to local charities as well. So he sort of has that, and then the West Herr arm of it. But eventually we sort of convinced Scott to like give us a chance to really brand this thing. And that's where we came up with West Herr Cares. And it was really more to say, Scott, if you're willing to sort of put yourself out there and show what you're doing, other people, business leaders locally, people that have the means to do this, and even frankly, some who maybe don't, would be willing to put, to whether it's financially or if it's just volunteering to do things they can do to give back. So we worked really hard to establish this brand, come up with sort of the brand identity for this. And we wanted it to feel like, to speak on it in like, marketing terms, that we wanted it to feel a little softer than maybe like the traditional West Herr brand of just being, this automotive dealer. We wanted it to feel like this community giving organization. So we came up with West Herr Cares, and we've really invested in telling those stories. So we do a lot of interviewing locally with organizations, trying to give them the spotlight for a change. And it's not just, the thing we find is a lot of organizations will promote the organizations that don't really need extra promotion. It's like
Sure.
the huge hospitals that already have a substantial budget, or these organizations that have government assistance in the millions of dollars that probably don't need our attention. But it's like the smaller organizations that really could use just some extra hands volunteering and things. So we try to do both. We try to show like our partners that we work with a lot, who do a ton of good in the community, but then also the small organizations that could use the attention. And we do all sorts of video storytelling. We do, just content creation, like on our phones, photography, events. We're heavily involved in events locally, so documenting the events, and that's sort of been, the last, I'd say, 6 years or so, has been continuing to tell these West Herr Care stories. And then a couple of years ago, I know I mentioned to you, we hired a director of community giving and support, who she had actually worked for one of those organizations locally. She was the CEO there for over 30 years, an organization called People Inc. locally here. And she had decided to retire. And Scott reached out to her and said, "Hey, do you want to do this thing for West Herr?" And she's like, "Well, I just retired." And, when Scott calls you, you typically listen, and she entertained it. And now she's been with us for a couple of years now, and she oversees sort of this nonprofit arm, technically part-time, but if you ask her, she's probably here pretty much full-time at this point. So Rhonda's awesome. Her name's Rhonda Frederick. And so we just have a lot of people that are doing a lot of good at West Herr. And what this brand does is it allows us to kind of package that in a way that it's easy to sort of understand, right? It's not like West Herr Toyota Williamsville's doing this thing over here, and the Toyota store in Rochester's doing this thing, and the Ford store in Hamburg's doing this thing. It's like we're a group. So we talk about it holistically of like West Herr cares at the end of the day. And that's not a lie. We do care. So it kind of all works together at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's a great way to frame it. It's because you're right. There's that balancing act of you want to give to give. You don't want to give to get the recognition for giving, right? And but there's also value in sharing those stories. You mentioned putting the organizations that you're giving to in the spotlight, telling their story. You mentioned, I don't remember if it might have been before we started recording, but also drawing attention for others that are in a position to give, that these are opportunities, right? These are, because in a lot of cases, even knowing what door to open is the biggest hurdle. So for people that are in a position to give, just showing, these are all the organizations we work with. This is how you can get involved, and being an example. So I think there's value in that too, which you guys do. You do a great job with it. So appreciate everything that you're doing up there.
Yeah. And like you said, you asked me before about like, well, does a person shop at West Herr because Josh Allen's the spokesperson? And I said, there's some people, but there's also a large group of people I've heard over the years that shop at West Herr because they know Scott calls it re-giving, right? He always says, sure, like, don't thank me for giving. All we're doing is re-giving what has been given to us. Because we've been so fortunate for the support of Western New York all these years. It's an obligation. It's not even an option. It's an obligation for us to give back to the community that supported us. So he always calls it re-giving, which I think is a great way to frame it. But there's a lot of people who shop here because they know that money is going to be reinvested into the community they live in. So when you do the right thing, I think it helps you as a business too. So.
No, you're right. That's a great way to look at it. Well, Brad, there's so much more stuff I want to unpack. I'm hoping that we can do a round two at some point. I want to be respectful of your time, though. So before we hop off today and wrap up, is there anything that we haven't talked about that we should? Any questions I should have asked you that I didn't?
No, I really enjoyed chatting with you a bit. I know there's always so much you can cover. And it's hard in a limited podcast. I've been there too, but no, I appreciate your time and the people listening, watching, and yeah, I think I'm in a fortunate position to work with a group that, like I said, has a lot of interesting stories to tell and does a lot of good in the community. So it makes my job a little easier, but I always enjoy sharing, a little peek behind the curtain at how we make it all run at the end of the day.
Great stuff. Well, Brad Gelber, Director of Marketing at West Herr Automotive Group, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm serious, we got to get you back on so we can do round two sometime.
You got it. Thank you for having me, and talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks. Wow, what a great conversation with Brad Gelber, Director of Marketing at West Herr Automotive Group. I hope you got as much out of that one as I did. We spent a ton of time on influencer marketing and professional athletes and how to get them as a part of your team from a marketing perspective. If you have any questions, I'm sure Brad would be happy to field a phone call, talk about what works, what doesn't, and any mistakes that he's made along the way. But great conversation. I really appreciate him hopping on, and excited to see where they go from here. Before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify podcasts. And make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.